1759. Like most European armies, Russian soldiers have bright and ornate uniforms to distinguish them amidst a battle. Similarly, Russian muskets were often copies of European designs with minor changes. At the time, officers also wore ornate outfits accentuated with a gold braid with a sword and scabbard at their side that serve as a symbol of their rank. 1802. In 1802, the Russian military uniform underwent another complete overhaul, as it periodically had since Peter the Great had first begun modernizing Russia's military forces. The concept of uniform was now entrenched and would now only evolve. The old long army kaftan finally took the form of a waist-length double-breasted coat with long tails at the back. Knee-length pantaloons were replaced with pants with sewn-on leather leggings that were worn over boots. And instead of the former winter coats and sheep-down jackets, the greatcoat made its debut in 1802. Made of coarse, undyed woolen cloth, it became an integral part of Russian military uniforms and remained almost unchanged for more than half a century. The most distinctive uniform element introduced here was the shako, a tall cylindrical cap fitted with an impressive sultan plume that was worn by the lower ranks of the infantry. As well as being decorative, the cap effectively protected the head against saber blows. Over time, the top sides were reinforced with black leather and the front with a copper plate shaped like a double-headed eagle or flaming grenades. By the way, did you know that the Armed Forces of the Russian Federation, the Armed Forces of Russia, is known to be one of the biggest in the world with about 1,200,000 troops active? 1812. At the time of the Napoleonic Wars, the military's uniform style was greatly influenced by the French and the Prussians. Although the designs remained gaudy, the standards were relaxed during the reign of Alexander I. Under Alexander I, the inconvenient practice of wearing braids and curls among the troops was erased, and the figure-hugging Prussian model uniform was also replaced by a version more familiar with the Russian soldier. The shako was altered on the eve of the 1812 war to give it a concave top and sides. Still bearing a plume, the form was unique and immediately identified Russian soldiers during parades of the Allied forces. Officers were issued with bright epaulets with fine fringes woven with gold or silver thread to denote junior officers and thicker fringes for senior officers. The center of the epaulets bore decals denoting the exact rank and branch of service and was colored for officers according to their unit. Officers also wore braided aiguillette from shoulder to breast and a plumed felt hat. However, officers relished the attention and very much liked standing out in a crowd, so their uniforms remained ostentatious despite the Tsar's opinions. On the other hand, army musicians were similarly well adorned and sometimes even more decorated than the officers, although it's very much fitting as part of their role in the military was to keep morale and spirits high on the field. The most resplendent uniforms were worn by the Russian light cavalry, the hussars, whose riding style and tactics originated in the steppes of Hungary. The Russian hussars also adopted a Hungarian style of dress, including the dolman short jacket. With its high collar and tassels, it was a source of immense pride, distinguishing the cavalry from other forces. A mentic cape with buttons and loops was worn over the jacket, but was tethered over the shoulder in warm weather. All parts of the hussars' uniform were made of high-quality material and trimmed with gold and silver thread. Generally, army officers had their uniforms tailored at their own expense, so especially well-made outfits directly reflected the individual's status. 1855. During the Crimean War, the Russian military began using precision-cap muskets, while some units wore spiked helmets. There was also evidence that the iconic pickelhaube was originally designed by Nicholas I, but the prototype was supposedly copied by the Prussians before the original made it to production. 1905. At the first time of the Russo-Japanese War, the Russian soldiers were reported to be among the very first in the world to have bolt-action rifles as a standard-issued military firearm. Did you know why the Russian army was called the Red Army? Not only has the Russian army historically worn red in the past, but they also use it as a symbol. Red was chosen in reference to bloodshed in the fight against the capitalist oppression of the USSR. 1914. As time went by, however, not only did the warfare begin to modernize, but also the military's appearance and equipment. By the time of the First World War, there were several necessary changes in the Russian military uniforms. Decorations eventually became a liability, and uniform colors shifted to a mixture of earth tones. However, some officer corps were determined to hold on to their symbols of rank for as long as possible, until an enemy sniper reminded them that it was not a good idea at all. 1917. The Russian Revolution created an immediate need for new decoration as soldiers from the White and Red armies wore near-identical uniforms. During the years of World War I, the Tsarist government stockpiled huge amounts of military uniforms, with no shortage of greatcoats, shirts, and footwear. If it wanted, the Red Army could have clothed several million troops at once. However, the main problem was that the White Russian forces were wearing those exact uniforms. In 1918, there were numerous instances when, during shifts in the front line, Red Army units only knew they were among the enemy when they started speaking with them. To identify friend or foe, the Red Army introduced a badge showing interwoven laurel twigs set on a red star. A crossed hammer and plow emblem in the center underscored the kinship of the workers and peasants with the people. But the most distinctive and widespread element of the Bolshevik uniform was the Budanovka felt cap, designed earlier as ceremonial wear for the anniversary parade of the still-ruling Romanovs. Named after decorated World War I and early Soviet cavalry officer Semyon Budyonny, the cap's design was modeled on the ancient helmet of Kievan Rus. Intended to inspire the troops through association with legendary heroes of old, the pointed-brimmed Budanovka had folded ear flaps and buttoned under the chin in cold weather. A large star was sewn on its brow, dyed red for infantrymen, blue for cavalry, and orange for the artillery. The Budanovka was later replaced by a flat-peaked cap with a red star. All military personnel received khaki uniform pants and tunics with the inside colors lined with a white cotton strip to avoid abrasion. The distinctive officers' uniform elements such as aiguillettes and shoulder straps were abolished and replaced with new insignia. Rank was now denoted by the number of triangles, squares, or diamonds sewn on the shirt and overcoat sleeves and flaps, and these also varied in color depending on the military branch. Over time, however, the Soviet military uniform lost the original elements of the revolutionary era and reverted to the lines of the Tsarist army. In 1924, all sewn-on insignia were removed, and only an officer's lapels showed his rank, also using squares, triangles, and diamonds, but now smaller and made of metal. 1938. Then, during border conflicts with the Japanese in the 1930s, NKVD guards were easily identifiable by their bright-colored tabs and belt buckles. 1939. On the eve of World War II, traditional military ranks replaced revolutionary ones, and generals and marshals reappeared in the Red Army with jackets sewn with red chevrons and gold braid. Officers were allowed to bear sidearms for the first time since the Revolution, and the imperial officer's headdress re-entered regular service, a change that was especially well received by the cavalry. But epaulets were not reintroduced until much later. 1941. Well into the Second World War, the military has made significant progress to modernization, with a new steel helmet and an upgraded Mosin Nagant issued to the military. Officers were similarly equipped with their Great War counterparts and used the same revolver, but all other influences from the previous government had been removed. At the time, officers wore the N-36 visor caps, which were emblazoned with the Soviet star, while the Red Army performed on the field until late 1942. They were much better equipped to deal with the cold than the German soldiers. More than that, Soviet marksmen and markswomen were deadly with their Mosin Nagant bolt-action rifle or semi-automatic SVT-40. Vasily Zaitsev and Lyudmila Pavlichenko became legendary snipers with these weapons. 1958. After the end of the Second World War, the Soviet Army became a fully modernized force, both in appearance and equipment. 1973. The Soviet military was equipped with an iconic AK-47 and later the AKM assault rifle, developed by Mikhail Kalashnikov in 1959. This rifle saw continued use throughout the decades and remains to be a reliable weapon platform to this day. 1979 to 1989. During the Soviet-Afghan War, the Soviet military adapted to the desert climate with tan-colored uniforms. 1994. With the fall of the Soviet Union in 1991, the new Russian Federation issued the military new camouflage uniforms in 1994. It appears that said new uniforms were first put into use in the conflicts in Chechnya. However, many still retained their Soviet-style belt buckles. 2015. Years later, Russian military forces were freed from the influence of the hammer and sickle on their gear. Equipped with an AK-12, a modernization of the reliable AK-47 from the Cold War, Russian Federation soldiers are as prepared as their Western neighbors. In contrast to the standing military uniform, the Honor Guard has a very ceremonial look, and it's equipped with the SKS rifle befitting their role on guarding high-profile locations like Russia's Tomb of the Unknown. Subscribe to the channel for more evolution videos.